Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about perfectionism.
Oh, great.
Yeah, exploring its different forms and, kind of how it impacts our lives.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is, and hopefully we can help all of you listening out there kind of understand and maybe even utilize your own perfectionistic tendencies.
Right.
And our guide for this whole journey is Katherine Morgan Schafler's book, The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control.
Wonderful book.
Have you read it?
I have.
Okay, great.
Yes,
So you know what we're talking about.
I do.
Awesome. So, yeah, should we just jump right in?
Let's dive in.
Okay, great. So, Schafler, she starts off by kind of challenging this idea that we should always be striving for balance.
Right.
Especially, this is something that's often, said to women
Absolutely.
that we need to like find balance.
Find balance, have it all.
Right. And she kind of makes this argument that this whole idea of, the pressure to find balance can actually be pretty limiting.
Very much so. It's like we're being told to shrink ourselves to fit into this predetermined mold.
Right.
And it can really stifle ambition and creativity.
Absolutely. And she also talks about how,
Oh,
ambition and drive are often perceived so differently
yes.
in men and women.
Huge double standard there.
Right.
You have someone like Steve Jobs, who's renowned for his, demanding perfectionism.
Right.
It's seen as visionary leadership.
He was like a genius.
Exactly. But then you have someone like Martha Stewart,
Oh, right.
who built an empire on meticulousness and attention to detail, and it's often framed within these traditional feminine domains.
It's like, oh, that's just Martha being Martha.
Exactly. And it's so interesting because they both share this core trait of perfectionism, but the way it's perceived and received is completely different based on their gender.
It really makes you think, huh?
It does. It really highlights how deeply ingrained these societal expectations are.
Right. And so speaking of, different types of perfectionism, that actually leads us to Schafler's categorization of 5 distinct types.
Oh, yes. This is one of my favorite parts of the book.
I love how she kind of breaks it down.
She makes it so relatable
Yeah.
with these real-life examples.
Yeah, so tell me about the 5 types.
Well, you have the classic perfectionist,
Okay.
embodied by Claire in the book.
What does Claire do?
Claire actually legally changed her name because the spelling lacked an E.
Really?
Yes, so that right there showcases that meticulous nature,
Wow.
the desire for order and precision.
So detail-oriented.
Extremely.
Wow. Okay, so that's the classic.
Then we have the intense perfectionist.
Okay.
Think of someone who thrives on efficiency and visibly struggles when things go wrong.
Oh, gosh, I know a few people like that.
Right, it's like that frustrated passenger on a turbulent flight.
Yeah.
Schafler actually describes a specific woman in seat 11A to really amplify that relatable frustration.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so classic in this.
Now, when we have the Parisian perfectionist,
What's a Parisian perfectionist?
they prioritize connections and may excel in their personal relationships,
Okay.
but coast a bit in their careers.
Interesting.
Lauren is a great example of this in the book.
Oh, tell me about Lauren.
She's stylish, effortless, but experiences a breakdown after a perceived disastrous meeting.
So it's like they're kind of putting on this facade.
In a way, yes.
Okay, interesting. All right, so then what's next?
We can't forget the messy perfectionist.
The messy perfectionist.
Known for starting strong, but then losing steam along the way.
Oh, gosh, that's me.
They often attribute their struggles to personal flaws.
Oh, that's so relatable.
It's a challenging cycle of self-criticism.
Is.
And finally, we have the procrastinator,
Okay.
often trapped in a loop of self-punishment and avoidance.
That one hits close to home for me, too.
It's a common struggle.
Yeah.
The constant rumination and numbing behaviors can be really tough to overcome.
Wow. So, I mean, her descriptions are so vivid. I feel like everyone listening is probably like, oh my gosh, that's me.
Right. It's incredible how she captures these nuances.
Yeah. And it's so helpful, I think, to like have these different categories because then you can be like, oh, okay, I'm kind of like this or I'm kind of like that.
It gives you a framework for understanding yourself better.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Okay, so now Schafler differentiates between adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism.
Yes. This is a key distinction.
And she kind of argues that, self-worth is at the heart of it.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So adaptive perfectionists draw their self-worth from their inherent value,
Okay.
which leads to a healthier relationship with striving,
Okay.
whereas maladaptive perfectionists base their worth on their achievements, constantly seeking that external validation.
So it's like they always need someone else to tell them that they're good enough.
Right. It's an exhausting cycle.
Sounds exhausting.
And to illustrate this, she shares the story of Simone.
Who's Simone?
She's a woman who struggled with suicidal thoughts.
Oh, wow.
And it was only when she started recognizing her inherent worth, independent of her accomplishments, that she found a path toward healing.
That's incredible.
It's a really powerful reminder that our worth is not tied to what we achieve or produce.
So it's like we're already enough.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a beautiful message. Okay, so then what about this idea of self-punishment?
Oh, this is another big one.
Okay.
Schafler links maladaptive perfectionism to this tendency for self-punishment.
Oh, okay.
And she uses Ava as an example.
Who's Ava?
She relapsed after months of sobriety,
Oh,
and instead of seeking support,
okay.
she punished herself relentlessly.
Oh, gosh. So she's like stuck in this cycle of like, I messed up, so I'm going to punish myself,
Exactly.
which of course just makes things worse.
Exactly. It's a downward spiral.
Yeah, so then how do we break that cycle?
Well, that's where self-compassion comes in.
Okay.
And she brings in this fascinating theory called the broaden and build theory.
The broaden and build theory.
Yes, it explains how positive emotions,
Okay.
like self-compassion, actually nurture problem solving.
So it's not just about feeling good. It actually helps us like be better.
Exactly. It fosters resilience.
That's so interesting.
It's a reminder that treating ourselves with kindness is not indulgent.
Right.
It's crucial for progress.
Okay, so self-compassion is key.
Absolutely.
So then what's next?
Well, this leads us to another pivotal concept in the book.
Okay.
Embracing imperfection
Yeah.
and relinquishing control.
Letting go of control, that sounds hard.
It can be, especially for perfectionists.
Right, because we like to be in control.
Exactly. But Schafler argues that it's essential for growth.
So how do we do that?
She champions this idea of ish thinking.
Ish thinking.
Yes.
What's that?
Accepting that things don't need to be flawless.
Oh, okay.
And to illustrate this, she uses this playful analogy of a hermit crab.
A hermit crab.
Yes.
What do hermit crabs have to do with this?
Well, they need a new shell to grow, right?
Right.
It's about recognizing that change and discomfort are necessary for development.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
And this ties into the concept of liminal space,
Liminal space.
a transitional phase where growth really occurs.
Okay.
It involves accepting uncertainty.
Oh, uncertainty is like the enemy of perfectionism.
It can feel that way.
Right.
But Schafler argues that it's actually an integral part of our evolution.
Wow, okay.
It's about embracing emptiness as part of the process.
So it's like we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about, self-compassion, letting go of control.
Yes.
What about like practical strategies for, actually like dealing with perfectionism?
Well, Schafler offers several really helpful strategies.
Okay,
Honoring the process.
Okay.
Celebrating small victories.
I like that.
And reframing setbacks as valuable learning opportunities.
Instead of like beating ourselves up.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective.
Right.
And she also stresses the importance of seeking help,
Oh, that's a big one.
which can be really challenging for perfectionists.
Why is that hard for us?
We often take pride in our independence and self-sufficiency.
Oh, yeah, we want to do it all ourselves.
Right, but Schafler reminds us that asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's actually a display of strength.
So it's like strong to ask for help.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so honoring the process, reframing, asking for help, anything else?
Another important strategy is prioritizing restoration.
Okay.
Self-care beyond just physical rest.
Oh, right. Like we tend to think of self-care as like taking a bath or something.
Exactly.
But it's more than that.
It's about nurturing our minds and souls.
Okay.
Engaging in activities that replenish our energy.
So it's like finding things that bring us joy.
Exactly.
Okay, so restoration is key.
And finally, she talks about the importance of identifying our core values.
Okay.
Making sure that our striving is actually aligned with what truly matters to us.
Otherwise, it's just kind of empty striving.
Exactly. She shares Lena's story,
Who's Alina?
a woman who constantly felt overextended.
Oh, I know that feeling.
And it was through clarifying her values
Okay.
that she found a path to a more fulfilling life.
So it's like figuring out what's really important to us
Exactly.
and making sure our actions align with those values.
Precisely.
Wow. So much to think about already.
It's a rich and insightful book.
It really is. So for everyone listening, as we kind of wrap up this first part of our exploration,
Yes.
what are some thoughts or feelings that are coming up for you?
What's resonating with your personal experience with perfectionism?
Yeah. Think about that.
We'll be back soon to continue this conversation.
All right, see you in a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, picking up from that whole self-compassion thing, I want to talk about this concept of struggle versus challenge.
That's a really interesting distinction.
It is, isn't it? And Schafler says that the difference can often come down to support.
Like having people there for you.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
whether we have support or not can determine if something feels like this impossible hurdle
Right.
or a surmountable challenge.
Like you can either feel totally alone in it or like you have this team behind you.
Exactly, and it makes such a difference.
It really does. And she talks about the dangers of isolation too.
Oh, yeah, she gets into that.
How struggling without support can lead to trauma, addiction, even suicidal thoughts.
It's serious stuff.
It really highlights the importance of connection.
We're not meant to go through things alone.
Definitely not. And she brings in the work of Dr. Bruce Perry here.
Oh, yeah, the trauma expert.
He emphasizes this idea of relational health
Okay.
as this key factor in building resilience.
So it's not just about, like, our own individual strength.
No, it's about the quality of our relationships.
That's powerful.
It really underscores that we're wired for connection.
That makes sense. We're social creatures.
We are.
So, okay, we've talked about embracing imperfection, seeking support, prioritizing restoration.
Right.
What other strategies does she offer for dealing with perfectionism?
Well, one that stands out is what she calls striking when the iron is cold.
What does that even mean?
It's about recognizing that sometimes the best approach is to step back.
Wait, take a break.
Exactly. Detach, wait for the right moment to act.
That seems kind of counterintuitive, though.
It does, doesn't it?
Like, as perfectionists, we often feel this urge to just, like, do something, fix it.
We want to control the situation.
Yeah, so how can this striking when the iron is cold actually help?
Well, she argues that forcing action when we're emotionally charged or depleted can make things worse.
Oh, so it's like making decisions from a place of calm rather than panic.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
It's about prioritizing wisdom over urgency.
Okay, I can see that.
She gives a great example with her client, Marissa.
Tell me about Marissa.
She was agonizing over an encounter with her ex and his pregnant new partner.
Oh, that's a tough situation.
It is, and Schafler pointed out that trying to control her emotional response wasn't the answer.
So what was the answer?
It was about acknowledging her feelings, allowing herself to experience them without judgment.
That sounds hard.
It can be, but it's so important.
Yeah.
And this leads to another crucial point she makes.
Okay.
The difference between emotional control and emotional agency.
Oh, that's interesting.
Control is about suppressing our feelings,
Okay.
while agency is about understanding them and choosing how to respond.
So it's like being in charge of our emotions rather than letting them control us.
Exactly.
And she talks about how this relates to trauma too, right?
Yes, she dedicates a whole section to trauma.
Because trauma can make it hard to regulate our emotions.
Absolutely, it can disrupt our sense of safety and control.
And that can lead to maladaptive coping mechanisms,
Like perfectionism.
right? Trying to control everything to feel safe.
She uses Naomi's experience as a case study.
Who's Naomi?
A client who was struggling with the aftermath of trauma.
Okay.
Her inability to predict or regulate her emotions led to intense self-punishment.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It is. It really highlights the need for a different approach when it comes to trauma.
So what's the different approach?
One that prioritizes safety, connection, compassionate self-care.
Okay, so speaking of self-care,
Yes.
Schafler has some interesting things to say about that too.
She argues that perfectionists often resist rest.
Why would we resist rest?
We equate it with laziness or inadequacy.
Oh, like we feel guilty if we're not constantly producing something.
Exactly. And she points out that we tend to overemphasize physical rest.
So it's not just about getting enough sleep.
No, there are other forms of restoration that are just as important.
Like what?
Engaging in activities that nourish our minds and souls.
Oh.
And she actually breaks down specific active relaxation activities tailored to each type of perfectionist.
Well, that's cool.
For example, she suggests intense perfectionists engage in strategic planning,
Yeah.
while Parisian perfectionists focus on nurturing meaningful connections.
So it's like finding restorative activities that fit our personality.
Exactly.
I love that. Now I'm curious about this idea of effective forecasting.
That's a fascinating concept.
What is it?
Essentially, it means predicting how we'll feel in the future.
Oh, like trying to guess how something will make us feel.
Exactly. And she says that our predictions can actually influence our current emotional state.
Really?
Yes, she talks about anticipatory pleasure.
The joy we feel when we imagine something good happening.
Right. And conversely, anticipatory anxiety.
The stress we feel when we think about something bad.
And she suggests that we can actually use this power of anticipation to our advantage.
Oh, that's interesting. So how do we do that?
Well, for example, she recommends intentionally planning and recalling positive experiences.
To like savor them.
Exactly, and also establishing boundaries to mitigate the distress of negative
So
events.
it's like being proactive about our emotional well-being. That's
Exactly.
pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so another thing I want to touch on is reframing our thoughts.
No, that's crucial.
Schafler dedicates a whole chapter to this,
She does.
arguing that reframing isn't about denial.
No.
It's about choosing a more empowering lens.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
she provides all these practical reframes,
Like what?
replacing attention-seeking behaviors with connection-seeking
Oh, I
behaviors,
like that.
or swapping "I don't know what I want" with "I'm reimagining what's possible for myself."
So it's about changing our language
Yes.
to change our mindset
Exactly. It's about challenging those negative self-perceptions.
and replacing them with more compassionate and empowering beliefs.
Precisely. And she emphasizes how even subtle reframes can have a big impact.
It's like those little shifts over time that lead to big transformations.
Exactly. Now, we've been talking about this all along, but I want to really emphasize the importance of asking for help.
That's a tough one for perfectionists.
It is, we like to do everything ourselves.
We think we should be able to handle it all.
And she even shares her own struggles with asking for help.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's refreshing to hear her vulnerability.
It makes her more relatable.
It does, and she really underscores that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
So it's brave to ask for help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she offers a simple formula for doing it.
What's the formula?
Can you help me with thing you need help with by way the person can help you?
Oh, that's easy.
It is, right. Clear and concise.
Along with asking for help, she also stresses the importance of setting boundaries.
Boundaries are crucial. They protect our energy time, emotional well-being.
And she quotes Prentice Hemphill here.
I love this quote.
What's the quote?
The distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously.
That's beautiful.
It is, isn't it?
It really captures the essence of boundaries.
It's about creating healthy space for everyone involved.
Honoring our needs while respecting the needs of others.
Exactly. And she reminds us that boundaries are not about being selfish or controlling.
Okay.
They're about creating a framework for healthy and sustainable connections.
I like that. Okay, before we move on, I want to talk about sleep.
Sleep is so important.
It's crucial, but we often neglect it.
We do. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness.
And Schafler argues that prioritizing sleep is one of the most neglected mental health interventions.
It's true. She cites Dr. David Dinges, who points out how sleep is often viewed as a waste of time.
Like it's getting in the way of our productivity.
Exactly. But Schafler emphasizes that sleep is not just about physical rest.
There's so much more to it.
It's essential for emotional regulation, cognitive function, overall well-being.
It's like our brains and bodies do so much repair work while we sleep.
It's incredible.
And she really stresses that getting enough sleep is not a luxury,
It's a fundamental need.
just like eating and exercising.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are your biggest takeaways?
For me, it's the importance of connection, choosing connection over isolation every time.
Absolutely. And for me, it's the power of self-compassion, being kind to ourselves, even when we mess up.
Both incredibly important lessons.
They are now in the final part of our exploration.
Yeah.
We'll talk about how to actually move from self-compassion to action.
Putting these principles into practice in our daily lives.
Exactly. Stay tuned.
Hmm.
All right. So we've talked a lot about understanding perfectionism,
We have.
but now I want to shift gears and talk about action.
How to actually live this stuff.
Exactly. How do we embody these principles in our daily lives?
Well, one thing Schaffer emphasizes is defining success on our own terms.
Oh, that's so important.
It's about letting go of that need for external validation.
And focusing on what actually matters to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She uses Lena's story to illustrate this.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about Lena again.
She was constantly feeling overwhelmed, overextended.
Like she couldn't say no to anything.
Right. And it was only when she clarified her values
Okay.
that she was able to make choices that truly resonated with her.
So she was like, okay, this is what's important to me.
Right. And everything else can wait.
And that led to a more fulfilling life?
It did. It's a great example of intentional living.
That's a good term, intentional living.
It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
So making conscious choices,
Instead of just reacting to whatever comes our way.
shaping our lives according to our values.
Exactly. And speaking of things we value, Schafler has a whole chapter on giving ourselves permission to experience joy and pleasure.
Oh, I love that.
It's so important,
But it's something we often struggle with,
especially as women,
right? We're often taught to put everyone else's needs before our own.
to be selfless and self-sacrificing.
And she even critiques the diet industry here.
Oh, yeah, how it's turned eating into this guilt-ridden experience.
Like, we can't even enjoy food anymore.
It's so messed up.
It is, and she argues that denying ourselves pleasure can actually disconnect us from our instincts.
Like, we lose touch with what truly feels good.
And then it becomes harder to trust our inner guidance.
She gives the example of Rebecca.
Tell me about Rebecca.
She wanted to move to Los Angeles,
Okay.
but she felt obligated to stay in New York for a job she didn't even like.
Oh, wow. So she was prioritizing external expectations.
Over her own desires.
And Schafler encourages us to ask ourselves this simple question.
What do I truly want?
That's a powerful question.
It's about giving ourselves permission to want things.
To dream, to desire.
Without feeling selfish or guilty.
I love that. All right, so along with embracing pleasure, she also talks about confronting the illusion of certainty.
Oh, that's a big one.
Because as perfectionists, we crave certainty.
We want to know what's going to happen.
Control everything.
But Schafler reminds us that life is constantly changing.
It's unpredictable.
And clinging to certainty can make us rigid.
Prevent us from adapting.
She uses the analogy of diving into the ocean.
Oh, we like that.
If we're fixated on finding that one perfect spot,
Okay.
we miss out on the beauty of the whole experience.
So it's about being open to the journey.
Embracing the unknown.
Trusting that we can handle whatever comes our way.
Exactly. And this ties into the concept of incrementalism.
Incrementalism.
Making small, consistent changes over time.
Rather than trying to do everything at once.
Which can be overwhelming.
Especially for us perfectionists.
We tend to go all in or all out.
But she says that incremental change is more sustainable.
And less likely to lead to burnout.
And she reminds us that healing isn't linear.
It's a process.
With ups and downs.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
But as long as we keep moving.
We're making progress.
Now, one final point I want to highlight is the idea of finding meaning rather than seeking closure.
Oh, that's so profound.
She argues that closure is often an illusion.
Like we're trying to control the past.
Trying to tie everything up in a neat little bow.
But life is messy.
And she encourages us to focus on finding meaning in our experiences.
Even the painful ones.
Extracting the lesson.
Letting those lessons shape our growth.
So it's about accepting that things don't always make sense.
But we can still find meaning in them.
And that meaning can help us move forward.
Exactly. It's a more empowering approach.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Schafler's book,
yes,
what are some key takeaways you'll be carrying with you?
For me, it's the realization that perfectionism isn't inherently bad.
It has its strengths.
It's a powerful force that can be harnessed for good.
And for me, it's the importance of self-compassion.
Being kind to ourselves throughout the process.
Giving ourselves grace.
Absolutely.
So before we say goodbye,
okay,
let's recap some of the key insights from our exploration.
Okay.
Number 1, perfectionism exists on a spectrum.
There are different types of perfectionist.
Number 2, self-worth fuels adaptive perfectionism.
When our worth is not tied to our achievements.
Number 3, self-compassion trumps self-punishment.
Kindness always wins.
Number 4, embrace imperfection.
Thinking is the way to go.
Number 5, seek support.
Connection is crucial.
Number 6, prioritize restoration.
Find what nourishes your mind and soul.
Number 7, reframe your thoughts.
Choose empowering perspectives.
Number 8, define success on your own terms.
Align your actions with your values.
Number 9, give yourself permission to experience joy.
Embrace pleasure.
And number 10, find meaning, not closure.
Extract the lessons from your experiences.
Wow, 10 powerful insights.
A roadmap for navigating perfectionism.
And remember, this is a journey.
It's not about being perfect.
It's about progress.
Embracing the ups and downs.
And ultimately creating a life that feels authentically aligned with who you are.
Beautifully said.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, may you continue to explore, learn, and embrace the perfectly imperfect journey of being human.